rather different than before. Let's look at those ahadith, okay? Let's see. So those ahadith, the group that we're in, is basically related to dhikr, okay? Related to dhikr. Let's see. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أحب العمل إلى الله ما داوم عليه صاحبه وإن قل. ما داوم عليه صاحبه وإن قل. Okay, so let's see. The most beloved deed to Allah is that, by the way, can I say God and not Allah? The answer is yes, I can. You can say God and you can say Allah. Both would mean God. So why do I prefer saying Allah, not gods? Because that's the word, that's the name that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had named himself. So I'd like to choose the word, the name that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had chosen. But even using the word God or Dio or whatever language that they, Elohim in Hebrew, you could use that. And certainly if it means God, if it means the creator, if it means as the one that people would worship, or the one that people would turn to mean God, then certainly you could use that. So even if we were to read the most beloved deed to God, that's absolutely fine. Okay, is that which it is its doer continues to do. Okay, so what are we talking about? ما داوم عليه صاحبه وإن قل. Even if it is little. So what does that mean? So the best of the actions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would love are the actions that a person is consistent with, basically. Dawam alayh, meaning that the person is consistent and making this deed as a long-term deed, even if it is small. Even if it's a small deed, even if it's a, let's say, a practice that's not necessarily, let's call it not necessarily too big in an action, but it's a small action, it would still be considered as, if you were to do it, that would be better than doing a big deed in one day and not being consistent on the other days. So what does that look like? So let's say you do 2 rak'ahs per day, 2 rak'ahs per day for, let's say, a whole month. It would be better doing 2 rak'ahs per day for a whole month than one day waking up and doing a set of probably 100 rak'ahs or 60 rak'ahs. So trying to be consistent as long as you can, even if the action is small, is better. So why is it better, even though it would be less? Because consistency gets you into a new programming. You get programmed into doing this action, and then it basically affects you and it starts becoming a new you. Little by little, you'll be able to expand later on from that person or from that, let's call it, level to a higher level, because now you had mastered the new level, even though it's a small one. But if you were to do something just one day and not be consistent with it, you're going to see that the impact is not going to be the same. The impact is not going to be the same on your commitment, on your personality, on your spirituality, and certainly the impact is not going to be long-term. The impact is going to be very temporary. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, for long-term effect, even if it's a small thing, it should be consistent. So it's consistency that makes success. That's basically the Prophet ﷺ, that's what he's telling us. Consistency is what makes success, whether you're consistent. In here, the Prophet ﷺ said, ahabbul amal. So all actions, it's consistency that makes a difference. So whether we're speaking about dhikr, whether we're speaking about a charity, maybe you're giving every single day, or let's say every single week you're giving out, let's say $10. It's better than choosing one day to probably make up for all those days that were that probably had passed or something like that. So you're being consistent, and that would be a bigger impact. It would create stamina within you. It would create perseverance. It would create consistency. It would create a habit within you. It would basically enable you to move on to the next level. Move on to the next level, whether in spirituality or whether in principle or whether in commitment, etc. Once you master it, even if it's a small dose, that's basically going to be having a bigger effect on you than doing it all at once in just one shot. Okay. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال سبق المفردون. That's an interesting word. قالوا وما المفردون يا رسول الله؟ قال الذاكرون الله كثيرا والذاكرات. What is a مفرد? Let's see the translation right there. The single ones have come out ahead. They said, and who are the single ones? O Messenger of God, he said, the men and women who remember God often. I'm not sure the translation is accurate or not, but let's see that there's a story behind this hadith. What's the story? So the story was the Prophet ﷺ was with the Sahaba. They were coming back from a battle, and certain people, they basically had raced or beat everyone to go home, do what they need to do, etc. And you had some people basically left behind and were going slower at a slower pace. So that's when the Prophet ﷺ said, سَبَقَ الْمُفَرِّدُونَ. The ones that were the ones that had anticipated, or the ones that had expedited or raced to basically reach the place first, are basically al-mufarridun. They're the single ones. Not many people made it to that race. Not many people basically had managed to have the potential to go fast and make it as soon as possible, but it's only very little numbers and very few people. So why did he say al-mufarridun? So the word al-mufarrid comes from the root fa which basically means just one singled out or one individual. Okay, could be the fard to mean an individual, and it could be a fard to mean just one or an odd number. Okay, so when you see odd numbers in Lugha Arabiya, odd numbers ironically are usually seen in Islam, or even in Lugha Arabiya, are usually seen as rare, and usually seen, like if you would say, for example, the general ibadat, you would see that they're usually even numbers. Okay? But the rare ibadat are usually even numbers. Tawaf, 7, not 8. الوتر 3, 5, 7, 9, 13. Odd number. All right. So Maghrib is 3. You would see that there's a certain correlation between something that is odd and something that is rare. Maghrib comes from the name Maghrib. What does the word Maghrib mean? Well, Maghrib means sunset, but Maghrib also means different. something odd, something west. Okay? Maghrib, west. And it could also, this person is Maghrib. How is it that you said odd? Like gharib. And that's why they would say al-Maghrib gharib. It's not a hadith, but our grandmothers used to say al-Maghrib gharib. Maghrib is strange. Why? Because there's not enough time. You got to do it as soon as possible because it basically passes out really fast. So when he said سبق المفردون, that's to tell us two things. That the people that would usually race to things, one, are rare people. So you would say very few people would attend those classes that are probably, let's say, an advanced level. مفردون, not many. You will find maybe 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, 11, you would find very few numbers. Okay, مفردون. Okay, it doesn't have to be necessarily, doesn't have to be an even number though. المفردون does not have to be an even number. It can be an odd number. So let's say we are 10. Are we still مفردون? Yes, we are still مفردون. Why are we still مفردون? Because the invitation was sent out to perhaps maybe almost, well, based on the numbers, we almost
like 150.
150. Okay, so 150. And then, but then the notification was probably unmuted by maybe a smaller number. Okay, but the ones that attended were only 9, 10, that's basically it, 11, 12, sometimes it can go up to 13, right? قالوا وما المفردون, and they said, well, who are considered المفردون? Now keep that word on mind, because المفرد is going to be number one. He said سبق. سبق means that they would rush, they would beat to the race. That's a سبق. المفردون would basically be the ones that are exceptional, the ones that are basically rare in their commitment. Okay. قال الذاكرون الله كثيرا والذاكرات. He said it's basically the people that would remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frequently. But wait a minute, why did he say الذاكرون والذاكرات? So الذاكرون is masculine. الذاكرات is feminine. So the men that are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frequently and the women that are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frequently, those would be the definition that the Prophet ﷺ is defining as al-mufarrid. Al-mufarrid as the ones that would be singled out, the ones that are rare, the ones that you would rarely find anybody joining along with them. They would be on their own. Why? Because other people would be joining in a gathering. You would see the bigger the entertainment, the more people go to, let's say, a singing place. You would see a lot of people just gathering there. But go to a place where there's dhikr, not many people are there because most people would see it as boring. Okay? Only the ones that would be doing a dhikr, that had been trained in doing dhikr, they had been consistent in it, will actually find dhikr as entertaining. And that's why he said, وَالذَّاكِرَاتِ. They would be probably sitting in a corner, doing their dhikr, la ilaha illallah, subhanallah, etc. Hey, even on their Instagram, on their reels, etc., they would be the ones to listen to maybe, they would be the ones to get the pop-ups of probably a lecture or probably a word of dhikr or maybe an ayah, etc. You would say certain things are popping up. But those that are obsessed with entertainment. All they will get is just entertainment after entertainment. It could be something really silly, extremely silly. All right. So when you look at الذاكرون الله كثيرا والذاكرات, those are the rare people. عن أبي
Can I
هريرة.
say something? Sorry.
يلا يا حبيبتي, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say that if only people knew, the happiness like it brings, subhanAllah, because when you go to these places, afterwards you don't feel happy because the malaika, the angels aren't there, and you don't feel like you gained anything from it.
Love it. So you are okay. So you are saying that in the beginning they don't feel the angel presence?
No, I'm saying if for people who leave these parties and these things like that, they go home and they don't feel the contentment inside. They don't feel the happiness because there's not going to be any angels present at a place where there's dancing and music, and you know what I mean?
Right. It's just shayateen right there. And true happiness is only going to be coming وأنه هو أضحك وأبكى وأنه هو أمات وأحيا وأنه هو رب الشعرى. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be the one to bring about that happiness. And that's why for the description of الصالحين, يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. If you look at this ayah, even though we had done it before in this class, but there's always an angle to see this ayah in. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is one of my favorite ayat. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة. O soul that was living in content. نفس المطمئنة. ارجعي, go back to your Lord Almighty. وادخلي في عبادي, and enter along. The word is في عبادي and not مع عبادي. So what's the difference? When you say fi, that means in. But when you say ma, that means accompanying. So in order to be a person of طمأنينة, الجزاء من جنس العمل. The punishment or the reward is going to be from the same type of whatever action the person was doing. So if you were listening to, let's say, hadith or Islam or etc., and you were consistent with it, then you would be amongst those that would be with the ones to basically get the reward of whatever they were doing, which is an action that leads to Jannah. So فَدُخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي, this person wasn't necessarily just accompanying those salihin. No. He or she, they were feeling that they are a part of them. These are my group. These are my people. This is what I enjoy. Surrounding myself with. These are the people. في عبادي. And then even on Judgment Day, or even during the barzakh, فَدُخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي, you're going to enter along with my servants. وَدُخُلِي جَنَّتِي, and now enter my Jannah. Let's see. لا عن أبي هريرة وأبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنهما عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: لا يقعد قوم يذكرون الله عز وجل إلا حفتهم الملائكة وغشيتهم الرحمة ونزلت عليهم السكينة وذكرهم الله في من عنده. يا سلام. يا سلام. A group of people do not sit remembering God Almighty except that the angels surround them, mercy covers them, tranquility descends upon them, and God mentions them to those who are with him. Okay, well, let's see if we can get the same in the English translation. لا يقعد قوم. لا يقعد قوم يذكرون الله عز وجل إلا حفتهم الملائكة. There is another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, the same meaning, ما جلس قوم في بيت من بيوت الله إلا حفتهم الملائكة, etc. That it was specifying it was in a house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you could see this hadith is also mentioned, but not necessarily specifying that it's in a specific or a designated area or space. لا يقعد قوم. Notice that it didn't say لا يقوم قوم. It said لا يقعد. They would be sitting down, and what are they doing? Any group of people, they would mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The malaika would be surrounding them. Wait a minute, so why are they sitting down? Because the only time that you would be sitting down is when you are prolonging your presence. Okay? If you're standing, you're probably going to be like, oh, it's just 2-3 minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes, and I'm just gonna go walk away, basically. But a person is sitting down, that's to reflect that the person is feeling that I'm gonna sit here for a long time, so I'll just sit and rest myself and do that dhikr. إِلَّا حَفَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. So wait a minute, so what are they doing? So you could see this hadith was talking about al-mufarridun. Where was it? This one. Basically individuals and not necessarily in a group setting. This one, on the other hand, is talking about a group setting. Okay, a group setting where people are sitting together doing dhikr. Wait a minute, so what does dhikr entail? What does dhikr look like? So does that mean we're sitting together and saying, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyid in one voice? Or does that mean that we're just sitting in the masjid, individual groups, and we're just probably just each doing their tasbih, istighfar, reading Quran? Or does dhikr also include a dars that we're probably doing? And do you have to not know the dars? So a dhikr would include reading Quran, learning the religion. What we are doing is considered dhikr. This is a jalsat dhikr. A virtual jalsat dhikr, would that be included in the hadith? Yes, it would be. So what would happen? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا حَفَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Forgot to mention what else includes dhikr. So reading Quran, dars, something that you would learn, tafsir, hadith, fiqh, etc. That's basically a form of dhikr. 3, istighfar, etc. Or even dhikr can be broader, that they're probably maybe doing, I don't know, taraweeh together, doing some form of, or maybe reading Quran, maybe each one would read a page and we're basically taking turns. What if we're doing it in a group setting? Okay? Group setting. Like what? Like all of us together. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. And we're doing it together, and we would pass out these papers, and it would say, we're going to do this one 10 times, we're going to do this one 7 times, we're going to do this one 3 times, and then in one voice, we're doing it together. To be honest, we don't actually have a hadith that mentioned that the Sahaba, along with the Prophet ﷺ, that they were doing this type of dhikr together. And it doesn't have to be passing out a paper. Okay, but they could have agreed and said, hey, we're going to sit together in the masjid. We're going to do with one voice. We're going to keep going. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh. We're going to do it together 1,000 times, 2,000, whatever it is. Okay. We don't have a single hadith that basically said that the Sahaba or the Prophet ﷺ had done it in a group setting like this. So you had certain scholars regard that is a bid'ah. that that's an innovation to do it in somewhat of a group setting with one voice because the Prophet ﷺ did not do it. That's the first group of scholars. And to be honest, they got a point. Let's go for the second opinion. The second opinion, they said it's not a bid'ah. Why not? Well, they said it contains dhikr, and it basically is, yes, the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it, but it's not something that would necessarily be considered as a bid'ah because their definition of bid'ah is different. Pay attention to this one. The definition that the first group had basically defined bid'ah in, they said al-bid'ah is supposed to be any ibadah that you would do. It must trace back to the Prophet ﷺ. Therefore, if you're doing a ritual, you're doing a religious practice, and you are doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you are doing it as a type of worship / ritual, then you can't invent your own, and you would have to basically have a sunnah, meaning that you would have to have an evidence to prove that it was done by the Prophet ﷺ. That's the definition for the first group. The second group, they define bid'ah differently, which usually are al-Asha'ira. They define bid'ah differently. They don't necessarily regard that it must be done by the Prophet ﷺ, and they basically said as long as it is within the parameters of Islam, as long as it is the parameters of Sunnah, as long as it is an action that is bringing in a good influence, a good impact in changing the person's deen, etc., even if it's a group setting, it would be basically considered as not a bid'ah. So the second group, well, wait a minute, so what's your evidence? The first group, their evidence was anybody that adds anything to our way, that is the sunnah, is basically going to be considered as dalala. All right? Anybody that adds anything would be considered dalala. So that was the general hadith. All right? من أحدث في أمرنا هذا ما ليس منه فهو رد. من أحدث, that's a hadith. من أحدث في أمرنا هذا ما ليس منه فهو رد. I gave you the translation earlier. Now I'm saying the Arabic words. Okay? Now, the ones that considered the opinion that it is permissible to do group type dhikr, they said, well, the Prophet ﷺ had heard Bilal ibn Rabah beat the Prophet ﷺ and scurry to basically race the Prophet ﷺ into going to Jannah. And same thing when we're looking at another Sahabi. The Prophet ﷺ had seen that there were angels rushing to take a certain dhikr that this Sahabi had done. I can't remember if it's Shaddad ibn Aus or another Sahabi. No, it's not Shaddad ibn Aus. It's another Sahabi. I forgot which Sahabi that was. But anyhow, so the Prophet ﷺ said, I had seen 33 angels race to take that dhikr and basically raise it. So they said, when the Prophet ﷺ told him, well, what did you say? He basically said a dhikr. Alhamdulillahi kathira wa subhanallah bukratan wa asila. Basically said a certain dhikr that he had done. The Prophet ﷺ didn't teach him that dhikr. Let's look at also Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. He had went along with a Sahaba, and then goes to this village. And then this village, the person that is the chieftain, he basically gets sick. And then they come, well, the Sahaba, they go to them and say, hey, can you serve us some food, anything? But they refused. Imagine you're dehydrated. You basically are so hungry, and all you could find is this village in the middle of the way, but then they refuse to give you any food. But then, ironically, they ask him for a service. What service did they ask for? They go to them and say, do you happen to have a treatment for our chieftain who's really ill? Abu Sa'id al-Khudri says yes. What happened? Abu Sa'id al-Khudri goes and reads the Fatiha 7 times. This chieftain كأنما نشط من عقال. كأنما قد نشط من عقال. He gets up as if he was a horse or a camel that was tied up, and all of a sudden you untie this rope that was chaining them, basically detaining them, and they just get up and boom, right there, as if nothing was there. What happened? So what we care about, okay, so he did the ruqya, and then he basically asked for a payment for the ruqya that he had done. What payment did he want? Well, he wanted the 30 heads of sheep. You know what that equals? 30 heads of sheep during our time, that might actually equal to maybe, I don't know, roughly $25,000. That's a big number. Just imagine. All right. I'll tell you a joke. So the other day I had a really bad headache. So my son, he comes to me, he's only 10, and he says, Mom, I could do you a ruqya, but you have to pay me for it. So me, to encourage him, I said, fine, do me a ruqya, but if I don't get healed, I'm not going to pay you for it. What was the payment? For him to play for 20 minutes. So he does the ruqya for like 20 minutes, and I got better, but 15 minutes later, I got my headache back again. So I said, well, Hudhaifa, I did get better, but your treatment was not long enough. The pain is back. And he said, well, that's because you didn't really pay me the 20 minutes of playing. See what happens? You have to be committed. I was going to give him the 20 minutes, but I said I have to first see if it's really working, just to teach him how to do this. But then he said, hey, you didn't give me the 20 minutes. So I said, well, it's only been 15 minutes. It has to be at least proven as a successful treatment for at least 2 hours. And yeah, so then it didn't work out. So then he started increasing the treatment, doing massages and feet massage and back massage and everything. Ya Rabbi, just give me 20 minutes of gaming. Well, it did work. Fell asleep and then, alhamdulillah, cured. All right, how did we get there? Yeah, so the treatment. So he basically gets 30 heads of sheep, which is almost $25,000, goes to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ basically asks, here's the catch in this, asks Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, how did you know that al-Fatiha was what would qualify as a ruqya? So what did he do? Well, he said, I basically got the inspiration that it was. Okay, now look at here. Is that considered, was it considered as a bid'ah? How do we understand this? Do we understand that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri just did a form of ibadah, a form of ritual, which is ruqya, without even having an action that the Prophet ﷺ had demonstrated that's permissible, that it's permissible to do it that way? Okay, so the other opinion that said that for something to be a bid'ah, we don't necessarily have to have a preceding sunnah, an action that was done by the Prophet ﷺ to prove that it is permissible, but it is enough to just generally stay within the perimeter of Islam. So the second opinion of the Ash'ari generally, and Sufiya, they would adopt that. They considered as long as you were doing dhikr, even if we do it in a group setting, and we're not necessarily adding music, but we're just doing it in a group setting, and it's encouraging us to stay committed to do this dhikr, that it would be permissible. That's the second opinion. Okay. Now, of course, the first group, they would basically, I would say, stretch out their swords and consider that, no, this is an obvious bid'ah, etc. But I personally would say, these groups also have at least a certain point of view that I wouldn't necessarily just call out as, okay, do I agree that it's not a bid'ah? No, I personally think the preponderant is a bid'ah, because if we're going to continuously add new things and say, well, I've got a different way of doing it, and then we're going to basically have an unlimited ways of doing dhikr, that we had seen how in different religions, and how, of course, such changes, we had seen how we basically within the Muslim community, we basically had continued to have just different bid'ah, different groups, different sects, and different cults, and etc. Then it becomes a place of deviation. They would forget the sunnah, and they would basically start holding on to these practices that ما أنزل الله بها من سلطان. Okay, so
I have three questions. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
wow.
have, yeah. Alhamdulillah, I'm not really raising my hand. Anyway,
good.
for making dhikr by yourself, do the angels, they come?
Yes, they do, dear.
Okay, that was the first question.
I was obsessed with reading Noura, this book. It was called Sifat al-Safwa. Okay?
Yeah, you said that's your favorite book, right?
That used to be my favorite book, not any longer. Because it was always talking about these stories of these people that were, I guess, engaged in ibadah, were so spiritual, etc., and how they were basically 1, mufarridun, 2, committed, 3, salihin, 4, they always happen to get some kind of a miracle, okay? And
yeah.
right, some kind of a miracle. And all of these stories were usually about people that were doing it as an individual thing and not really a group thing. It's a real thing. Just stick to the mufarridun. I would really stick to that. There's a personal setting. Yes, she's sitting in a corner doing her dhikr, or maybe at home, just doing her dhikr. Everybody else is probably just having fun, talking, watching a movie or whatever they're doing, but she's sitting on her own and not engaging with everyone else, just doing her dhikr.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah. I'll ask the third question later, but when it comes to ibadah, can we base worship on a weak hadith?
Can we base worship on a weak hadith? The answer is yes and no. Let me explain it. So if you look at most of the ahadith that were mentioned in Fada'il al-Suwar, what is Fada'il al-Suwar? Fada'il al-Suwar would mean the importance of a certain surah. Like it'll tell you if you read Surah Al-Kahf, for example, on a Friday, you're going to basically get this. It's not an authentic hadith. But can I do it? Yes, you can do it. It was a practice that we saw that the Salihin were committed in, etc. And same thing, if you were to read, for example, this or that surah, you would get, let's say if you read it 1,000 times, this is what you would get. If you would, this is a certain dhikr. Is it ibadah? It is. Is it a hadith sahih? Da'if? It's a hadith da'if.
I just wonder because my
hold on.
Oh, sorry.
The tricky part, if this hadith is very weak to meaning mawdu', then no, you cannot depend on ibadah on a mawdu' hadith. Okay.
Yeah, because my son's teacher, he was telling the class that everybody needs to say sallallahu alayhi wasallam 80 times. And so I was, I asked him for the evidence for that, and it was based on a weak hadith. So I just, I don't want my son to learn that and think, okay, every Friday we need to do, you know what I mean?
No, do it, Noura. Do it, even though it's not necessarily an authentic hadith. But
remember, I just want him to understand the difference between, you know what I mean?
Like, right, but yeah. I'll tell you one thing, Noura.
Like, I'm happy he's doing it.
Right.
But I just want him to know that the numbers itself is not, it's not a certain number. Yeah.
Right. So when we speak about, for example, weak hadith, like I said, if it's not mawdu', if it's not a fabricated hadith, then you can actually embrace that. If it mawdu' basically is makdhub, it's basically made up, completely made up. Okay, then that's different. But if it's not completely mawdu', in other words, it contains some da'f in it, maybe mursal, maybe mu'an'an, etc., then in that situation you can actually take that hadith and you can apply it. So it basically is very common that a lot of the Sufiya would depend on weak hadith. Let's give an example. Fasting Rajab. Fasting the month of Rajab. We don't actually have authentic ahadith in regards to fasting the month of Rajab. All the ahadith are actually weak ahadith. But can I fast the month of Rajab based on the weak ahadith? Okay, and consider that as a good deed? Differences of opinions between scholars based on the definition of what is a bid'ah. Okay, so the first group that we had talked about earlier, they regarded a bid'ah is anything that goes out of what was proven to trace back all the way to the Prophet. And therefore, if it's not authentic, then they'll consider it bid'ah. The other group of scholars, they said, no, even if it's a weak hadith, unless it's fabricated, then there is a possibility that there's a basis to this action. And to say that it is fabricated or that it's a bid'ah is also logically, according to them, they're saying, I'm putting in, the voice of support in both ahadith. I'm just letting you engage in it. It doesn't mean that I believe in this. Okay.
Yes.
So the second group of scholars, they said, hey, even if you don't necessarily have an authentic hadith for it, as long as it's within the perimeter of a possibility, because you've got 69 or even more, according to some scholars, but you had 69 different classifications for a hadith da'if, then you cannot necessarily assume that every hadith da'if is entirely not having any origin or is basically baseless.
And that was with usul al-fiqh?
That's usul al-fiqh, exactly.
Okay.
They're basically debating, is there any basis to prove that a good deed, even if it's a ritual, a good deed can be practiced if it's in certain parameters of dhikr, etc., even if it's a group setting. For example, we're doing nasheed together, I don't know, doing nasheed together, reminding us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Noura wrote a poetry, and then we loved the poetry. We sat together in a class and we started singing the poetry. Or maybe sitting together, طَلَعَ الْبَدْرُ عَلَيْنَا, and we started singing طَلَعَ الْبَدْرُ عَلَيْنَا, for example.
Men and women?
Well, I mean, let's not go into that parameter. Let's just say we're all women together, okay? We're all women together and we're singing طَلَعَ الْبَدْرُ عَلَيْنَا together, okay? Is that permissible? So the first group would say, well, that was never done by the Prophet ﷺ, period. And then the second group will say, well, I mean, there's nothing wrong because طَلَعَ الْبَدْرُ عَلَيْنَا, as an example, even though there's no evidence that it happened after they had basically migrated to Medina, because Thaniyat al-Wada' is not one, we mentioned that one before, but they were most likely coming from Tabuk, but regardless, that they were chanting this. So can we chant it in a masjid? They were chanting it in, I guess, in the city, became common and people were chanting it together, but can we chant it together in a masjid? Maybe on a Mawlid day, can we chant it together? That's that second opinion that regarded it as, yes, it's permissible. It's to remind us of the history of the Prophet ﷺ, to remind us of dhikr, to remind us of, the good things. And then there is nothing wrong with it, according to the second opinion. Okay. I personally think the preponderant, and I like to stick to the first opinion, that
me too, because how are people going to know what Islam really is?
Right. So I personally stick to the first opinion. Not only how are people going to know what Islam is, but if we're going to continue adding on these developments, then without us realizing, people are going to add onto the development something new, exactly like you had seen, for example, the Sufi tariqas. You have the Naqshbandi tariqa, which basically does the circulating around in type of dhikr, and they'd be like, Allah, Allah. Allah, Allah, Yahu, Yahu, and they'd be going in circles, Yahu, Yahu, and Allah, 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 Hay, etc. And you would have other groups, they would actually add another thing, like a Shadhili tariqa. They would even add music onto it. They'd say, hey, it's just to keep us engaged. And what do we see? We're not only seeing tambourine, but hey, we're even seeing men and women together. One is holding a guitar, the other one's probably a flute, the other one's probably on a piano, whatever it is. And we're saying, oh yeah, now this is a different way to keep us engaged in our dhikr. We did our salah, but right after it, we kind of sit together and forget the men and women. Let's just say women. And what are we doing here? We're going to be adding this. Then you had another group, the Mawlawiyya tariqa, basically added, yeah, we're going to go down and, the Darvish thing, the Turkish Darvish, they would wear this long chef hat and these long skirts, and they would go in circles, and they would say that they are uniting with the divine by getting themselves dizzy, looking at them. This is real.
I didn't know they say that.
Yeah, they're saying that they're uniting with the divine, and it's giving them some kind of a vibe. So they would go into this circle-y thing, and they would stay for hours going, man, just watching them. Man, I got dizzy just thinking about them.
Yeah, I mean, the deen is complete, alhamdulillah.
Absolutely. So that's another evidence that group actually used. They said, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. There's no addition after that. It was approved in those different instances, but that's basically during the time of the Prophet. Ibrahim, you wanted to say something, dear.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I want to ask about this book that you explained. Can you send me this book?
صفة الصفوة.
Yeah.
You want صفة الصفوة? It's in Arabic. I don't think it was translated.
Not translated, not by English, not translated
It's
by
in
English.
Arabic. It's in Arabic. I don't think it was
بالعربي.
translated. Yeah, it's in
Thank
Arabic.
you. جزاك
Yeah.
الله خيرا كثيرا.
But
وإياكم.
don't forget about the Google what is it? The AI.
The AI. Yeah, you could do that. You could do that AI translation for the whole book. You certainly can. There's the AI, you could actually buy a subscription.
You have to
And,
share the book with us, the link on the chat.
Sure. Let's see. Let's see if I can find a book. Hold on. You have been Sifat al-Safwa, right? Let's see. Here it is. Imam ibn al-Jawzi. This is it. So now you can find it. See, it's really easy to find. Here's al-Maktab al-Shamila. And here's the archive. Okay. And there you go. Okay. I recommend reading this book, but I don't recommend it. Okay. Just heads up. I recommend reading the book because you would really feel that you are doing nothing compared to these salihin. Like they would spend the night, the day, and their dhikr is just something that is too utopian for you and for me. It's not something that we're capable of doing, but these people were doing these efforts to engage in dhikr like you had never heard of. I don't recommend reading the book because you're definitely going to feel really guilty. And the other thing, you would read that book. Definitely, it's going to encourage you to do more ibadah. But you're going to read that book and then start looking for miracles, like karamats, like, that's it, I should be getting a karama soon if I were to do this. So I do recommend reading the book, but I don't recommend it as to encourage you to read it. There are a lot of secrets in it. Tells you a lot of stories of salihin and so forth, and it's quite interesting to hear all of that and to see something you had never seen before. Of course, just keep in mind, okay, while you're reading that book, keep in mind that those are rare people. This wasn't common. So I don't want you thinking that everybody was the salih person that was practicing that. Those are very, very individual cases. Okay, let's continue. إلا حفتهم الملائكة. What is حفتهم الملائكة? حفتهم actually means to surround something. So if you're surrounding something, you're circulating something, that's حفتهم الملائكة. So the angels would be circling them. But will the angels circle these people? Circle them with what? Circle, just giving them a circle? I mean, what is that supposed to mean anyways? So when you look at al-malaika themselves, malaika have different responsibilities, different basically effects. Some malaika are there to guard you. Other malaika are to keep track of your sins. Other malaika are to keep track of your good deeds. Other malaika are to inspire you to do good. Malaika to inspire you to do good. Yes, malaika to inspire you to do good. Other malaika are to bring death to you. Other malaika are to bring rain. Other malaika to bring rizq. Other malaika to basically write down what type of person you're going to be in the future. Oh, those are other malaika. Now we have different malaika that basically have different things. But here's one thing that we may not recognize. When you say حفتهم الملائكة, If we're speaking about human to human, remember yesterday when we talked about human to human, that we could even smell fear, we could smell happiness, we could smell this. There's a certain vibe with human beings giving us some form of communication, and it's passed on to us. You sit with a group of people that are just making jokes, you're going to find yourself just basically getting, I guess, that dopamine, and you're just going to be laughing, you're just going to feel happy. Sit with a group of people, they're probably doing, I don't know, a funeral, and you're going to feel sad at that moment. Well, if that's a profile, or that's, let's call it a communication, a subtle communication, even though they didn't tell you to be happy. Okay, they didn't have to say be happy. Just by you seeing a person laughing, you started laughing. Seeing a person crying, even though you don't really know what's wrong with them, but you just start crying. Okay, especially if you're a very sensitive person. Okay, you'll start crying, you'll start laughing, you'll start, getting into the vibe. Okay, can we have the same communication with things that we cannot see? Yes, we can. Shayateen. We can have communication with shayateen. We can't see them, but they'll do what? They'll do al-waswas. Right? That's why for basically the people that lose their deen, what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ. Just the salihin, even if it طائف من الشيطان, kind of like a ghost or kind of like just a shadow of a shaitan, just passes by them. تذكروا فإذا هم مبصرون. They'd be the ones to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then boom, right there, they're capable of seeing things. Why don't you look at this one? When you say حفتهم الملائكة, what does that really mean? Just like there would be a communication that we basically communicate with the world around us, whether we recognize or we don't recognize, there's certain communication that can happen with shayateen. There's another communication that can happen with malaika as well. Our brain, our body communicates with the malaika. And just as shayateen can inspire us to evil,
so they can know our thoughts, right?
Well, it's not necessarily to know thought per se, it's to inspire you to good, because remember,
okay, so they don't know what we're thinking.
Well, I mean, if الشياطين يوحون إلى أوليائهم, الملائكة would also give a certain type of wahi. There's a certain type of wahi. There's the general meaning of wahi. What does wahi mean? Wahi means a secret signal. A secret signal, a hidden signal. That's general wahi. In wahi, there's a specific type of wahi, like the wahi that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent unto Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You're never going to get Jibreel coming to you and giving you a Quran. Okay? Simple. But there's another type of wahi. أوحينا إلى أم موسى. طب لحظة شوي. Musa is not even a prophet. How did you get wahi? Well, just like رب العالمين أوحى ربك إلى النحل. Just like that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أوحى ربك إلى النحل. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given the bees also wahi. What is that? It's a certain hidden signal. So when you see أوحينا إلى موسى to do a certain inspiration, why? Because she was a salihah woman. Maryam alayhi salam, when she had Prophet Isa alayhi salam, هزي إليك بجذع النخلة تساقط عليك رطبا جنيا. What happened? Was that a wahi, or was that baby Isa alayhi salam, or was that a certain inspiration that she got? Allahu a'lam. Scholars have differences of opinions. But in the end, when you say حفتهم الملائكة, that is to basically mean certainly the malaika would basically inspire them, 1, with khair, 2, with mercy, 3, with sakina. What's the difference? Il-khair is basically 1, حفتهم الملائكة, to register their good deeds, just like in another hadith. that the malaika would go up and say and start basically telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows where these malaika are coming from, but they would basically be so proud that they wanted to share who they were with. These salihin, they were sitting together, listening to a class and hadith, etc. And they were together listening. Some of we were 12 a.m. and even though it's 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. for some of them, but they were awake to listen to the class. Okay. And what happened? So they're right there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then would mention them to the other malaika. So here's hafatul malaika. What? Hafatul malaika, to surround them, to register their deeds, to record their good deeds. Hafatul malaika, to inspire them with khair, in order to keep them basically committed to the khair that they're doing. And hafatul malaika with sakina and rahmah. In another, that's why, here we go. So this hadith would basically explain even further what hafathum al-malaika would mean. So here we go. It gave us the three things that we just mentioned. غشيتهم الرحمة. What is غشيتهم الرحمة? They would feel the mercy. In other words, what is mercy? Mercy is when you would feel that security. That's the mercy. You would feel security. You would feel a sense of calmness. نزلت عليهم السكينة. السكينة is different than سكينة. Sakina is a knife. Sakina is tranquility. So what does that mean? It comes from the root sakana. Sakina means to stay subtle, to not have movements, waves. So sakina is what brings good mental health. Keep that one in mind. What brings good mental health? It basically lets you be on the inside, feeling stability. They're all connected.
Allah. Allahu Akbar.
So when you look at that sakina, you're in this group, it gives you mental health. It basically keeps you intact with feeling that security. You're not feeling that wave on the inside and anxiety. And وَذَكَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنْ عِنْدَهُ. And the Lord Almighty would mention these people on Judgment Day, that these people, or not only on Judgment Day, but even during our time, would tell the Malaika, Noura, Ibrahim, Umayyah, they were all listening together from different parts of the world, and they were gathering to listen to a hadith. And together, the Malaika would do Ghashiyatuhum ar-Rahma for me here in Malaysia, Noura in Virginia, the other one Oklahoma, the other one is probably in Cambodia, the other one's in Minnesota, etc. And each one will get this. They don't have to necessarily be sitting in a group. It could be in different ways. They'll get sakina, they'll get rahmah, and ذَكَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنْ عِنْدَهُ. So what's the importance if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions us? What does that mean? ذَكَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنْ عِنْدَهُ. On Judgment Day, the malaika would be the ones to basically remember those names that they had heard before, and they'd start looking for them in Jannah. Where's Noura? Where's Umayyah? We heard their name before. We wanted to see them. Just imagine the malaika searching for you in Jannah. Just imagine that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would...
Allah, that's so beautiful.
Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Your name. It's like, God, even the Jannah would remember that there's a person that belongs here. There's a person, their name is on the list of people of Jannah. Ya Rabbi. Ya Rabbi. All right, let's go for the other hadith. عن أبي موسى رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم مثل الذي يذكر ربه والذي لا يذكر ربه مثل الحي والميت. So let's see. The example of the one who remembers his Lord and the one who does not remember his Lord is like the example of the living and dead. Wait a minute. So how is that? So when you say mathalu, so the Prophet ﷺ is basically giving us a comparison here. And this comparison is basically to do what? Mathalul ladhi, to give us certain commonalities and certain differences, to point them out, basically. What's the commonality and what's the difference? So the common thing is that الذي يذكر ربه مثل الحي. A person that remembers the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like the person that is alive. Why? Well, because remember, in order for you to consider life, you need to find rahmah, you need to find that mercy, you need to find that security, or else you're living in anxiety. You would feel that, you know what, maybe I should commit suicide. They would start thinking of suicide and all of that. Why? Well, that's because they're not feeling secure. They're not feeling that stability. All they're living is anxiety and turbulences on the inside. Their brain is bringing in them all these thoughts, and it's not even stopping. It's paranoia, it's psychosis, and blah, 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 all these different things. And then all of a sudden, you just feel like you're living, but you're dead. And in order to end this, you start getting thoughts, maybe I should just commit suicide and all of that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ basically tells us, well, one key thing for treatment for those that are feeling that, for those that are not feeling rahmah, not feeling sakina, not feeling that when you say dhakar fi man inda, it's basically to remind you, we all love people mentioning us in good. We all love it when people would consider our presence. We all, in one way to basically let somebody feel that they're important is basically, hey, you know, this reminded me of you or something like that. And you would feel like, oh, it brings you nashwa. Kind of makes you feel good. At least, well, someone remembered me, etc. It feels good. Hey, we're human beings. It just feels good that someone remembered me. Even though it won't really have a direct influence. How about if Malaika and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically the one to remember and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't forget, but of course, to regard you. To regard you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgets or doesn't forget? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forget. So how is it Nasullaha fanasiyanhum? They forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forgotten them? No. They disregarded Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala disregarded them. So now, on the other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they mention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ذَكَرَهُمُ Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would mention their name. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would mention their name. Okay, so the comparison here, الَّذِي يَذْكُرُ رَبَّهُ مَثَلُ الْحَيِّ is basically a person that remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that names the names and continuously mentioning the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like a person that is alive. What's an alive person? A person that is alive is a person that is vibrant, a person that is active, a person that is vibrant is a person that has basically the energy to do something. A person that is alive is a person that has a spirit, has a mind, has a heart. Everything is basically functioning. Everything is functioning. A person that is mayyit is basically a person, there's no life. 1, 2, no energy. 3, nothing is functioning. They're completely dead. And certainly, they're just decomposing. This one, no. They're basically adding and adding and adding. It's subhanAllah how the Prophet ﷺ was basically comparing. A person that is doing that dhikr, you will see life in them. You will see them happy. You will see them basically living and resembling at least life, the readiness to accomplish, the ability to accomplish different activities, etc. That's why one of the first signs of anxiety is this person is not capable of doing anything. This person is feeling so down that they cannot complete their activities. They can't do anything. They just want to stay sleeping, away from people, away from different activities, etc. They're basically finding themselves ostracizing themselves little by little, and certainly going into a state of loneliness. So what happens? Not everything doesn't mean if anybody's going through anxiety, doesn't mean that they lost their deen. Okay, that's a different story. I do have some details in that regards, but some of what is classified as probably depression, some of it, not all of it, some of that is classified as a depression is more of a symptom of lack of dhikr, not all of it. So not every single person that's going through depression means that they are lacking dhikr. But some of those that would be classified as going through depression, they're basically needing the treatment of increasing dhikr. You increase dhikr, it will basically start coming in bringing in al-Rahmah, bringing in al-Sakina, bringing in you feeling good about yourself, because there's the vibe. Remember, the malaika would communicate with you in different ways that you may not know of, just like as human beings. Okay, so let's go for the other hadith. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كلمتان خفيفتان على اللسان ثقيلتان في الميزان حبيبتان إلى الرحمن سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. Let's see. 2 words are light on the tongue, heavy on the scale, and beloved to the most merciful. Glory be to God and his praise. Glory be to God the Almighty. Well, I mean, okay, I don't know. You'll judge the translation in just a bit. So what is kalimatan? Kalimatan doesn't necessarily mean literally 2 words, but this is talking about metaphorically 2 statements, okay? 2 statements that they're easy on the tongue. So here it said light on the tongue. Well, light on the tongue in metaphor, that is. They're not hard to say, but a person that's probably not used to it is probably going to find it hard, especially if the person is not Arabi. So they're going to be just finding it hard to say Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. But of course, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us khafifatani ala lisan. Very simple, very easy. And in the beginning, it might feel that it's hard to say, but with practice, it basically becomes something that your brain basically masters. And it's really interesting. I think I told you about Andrew Newberg before, even though he a Jewish agnostic, but he was doing this study in doing these brain scans. He's a neuroscientist, in doing these brain scans on people that would speak in tongues or worship. So these people that are new to worship, regardless of the faith, and others that were always engaging in ritual meditation, and they're continuously doing it. And he was basically finding that the brain scans did show that those that were not continuously doing it, their brains were not lighting up in the same way that a person that was doing it frequently, like maybe monks, maybe priests, etc. They're frequently doing it and their brain would light up in certain ways. And when they're lighting up in certain ways, it basically gives them more energy. You know, it's really interesting how, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide him to Islam, because guide everybody to Islam, but remember his name. Look up his videos. He's got some TED Talk. He's got some things, and subhanallah, he was actually talking about the findings that he was doing in the MRI scans and on those people's brains, etc. And he was literally using the word firing in the brain. He was saying that such meditation was lighting up in the brain, firing in the brain, and it's basically having a different impact. And that's what he was finding. And I would say, certainly. And you might question, well, how is it with a person that is not Muslim is also getting the same thing? Yeah, well, certainly, even if a person is not Muslim, they're still thinking, and their brain is connecting with what you would define as God. So when they would look at the sky, whether they would think of Elohim, or whether they are thinking of Dio, or whether they are thinking of God, or whether it's the word or Allah, or etc., you would say that we would all connect with a certain deity. But where did they go wrong? They went wrong in the worship. They went wrong in the worship. They went into that shirk. But can a person that is not Muslim go in a state of khushu'? Yes, a person that is not Muslim can go in a state of khushu'. They would be singing hallelujah, doing the gospels and all of that, and then they would be crying, etc. Are they getting a sense of khushu'? Yes, certainly they're getting a sense of khushu'. They're thinking of,
But is that iman?
Is that iman? So iman itself is an exclusive term to mean that they're believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're basically believing in whether it's the name or okay. That's a specific term. But is it iman billah in general? The answer is yes, it's iman billah in general. If we're talking about the literal term, of course it's iman billah. Your grandmother probably, worshiped Jesus. And, my grandmother was a Catholic nun, and she would have her own corner within our house. And her own corner had basically the, different, you remember, she's Catholic. So in our own house, she would have her corner where she had her crosses, her rosario or her beads, and her little tiny, these these paintings, which basically was resembling Virgin Mary and resembling Jesus, peace be upon him. And of course, she would have it in her corner. And there were many times where she would just wipe on them. She would hold the rosario, and I would see her cry, and I would see moments where she would just bow down and start doing the cross on her body, etc. And many times she was really crying, and she was definitely feeling some sort of khushu'. She wasn't faking it. She wasn't faking it, for sure. She wasn't faking it. Fake it to impress who? All right. So was she really feeling in iman? She was really feeling in iman. But of course, is that iman going to be taken? Well, that iman, if it's kufr, if it's shirk,
Yeah, exactly.
it's not going to be taken. But why not? I don't remember, إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به ويغفر ما دون ذلك لمن يشاء. Did the mushrikeen in Quraysh, when they were asked, قُلْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, they would say Allah. He would tell them, well, قُلْ, and ask them, who was the one that brings you the rizq? And they would say Allah. So if it's Allah, then why are you worshiping those idols then?
So I know that like if someone was to have Alzheimer's or dementia or something, is that only for Muslimin that they're not held accountable, or I'm just curious, sorry.
So if a person goes through dementia, نسأل الله العفو والعافية يا الله, it's يا ربي نسأل الله العفو والعافية. Anyhow, so if a person goes through these kind of regressions, okay, they basically would be held accountable for the things that they had done before. That's one. Number two, there is another opinion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would basically judge them based on the action that they were committed to. 1, 2, he would basically judge and give them some time on Judgment Day. That's another opinion that they would be
Oh
considered
yeah,
like
or
Ahl
tested
al-Fatra.
on Judgment Day.
Right, like Ahl al-Fatra. Well, Ahl al-Fatra would be the ones that existed before the Prophet ﷺ and after Prophet Isa alayhi salam. All right, and they didn't get any information about Islam. So think of the people, and I was watching the other day. There's this island. This island, no one ever got there. I think it was near India or something. Forgot what that island was called, even though I was watching a whole documentary on it. And no one ever got there till this day. No one can get there because these people will just kill them.
Wow.
Yeah,
There's
they'll just kill them.
still places like this.
Yeah, they tried somehow getting to them, this missionary guy. So he would throw gifts for them, like pineapple, or what is it called, coconuts and stuff like that, for them to somehow bribe them that this person is sending us stuff. So he's like, you're reaching out, maybe we could do that. This missionary was trying to do that. I forgot what his name was, but regardless, he was killed. But then they did accept at one point. It was a woman. I think I forgot if she was a psychologist or something, but anyhow, she was also throwing gifts, and they allowed her for some time. But then again, it was bringing in another flashback, and then it wasn't easy to get there again. So once they had, of course, even the military got involved. So to them, it's like, okay, that's it. These invaders, they're bringing us illness, they're bringing us death, etc. So it wasn't easy to communicate with them at all. And so these people, for example, they never got that risala. What would be considered as something that they will be not held accountable? They never got that risala for sure. So they would be treated like Ahl al-Fatra. On Judgment Day, they would be recreated, and they would be given the test again. Okay, that's one opinion. The second opinion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahu a'lam, how he's going to deal with these people, and on what basis will he be judging them, Allahu a'lam. Well, we're not part of those people, so nothing to worry about. Okay, but maybe something to worry about. Can we at all get the message to these people? Okay. خفيفتان على النساء ثقيلتان في الميزان. What is ثقيلتان? ثقيلة means heavy in its weight. ثقيلة في الميزان, it's heavy in its weight, it's heavy in its value. So what is الميزان? الميزان is a scale. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. Scale. So what scale is it talking about? Remember, on Judgment Day, there's going to come a time where the person, they're not going to be getting weighed in how much of workout they've been doing, but they're going to be weighed based on the deeds that they were doing. So that's the qilatani fil mizan. The person was bringing in good deeds. That's going to be the deed that is going to be very heavy on the scale. I guess that's the only time that you would really want to be overweight, huh? Overweight, at least.
Yeah.
All right. At least you would really want to see those numbers go up. That's the only time. حبيبتان إلى الرحمن. حبيبتان إلى الرحمن. That حبيبتان means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves them. And the Rahman, why al-Rahman, not Habibatani ilallah? Because when you say al-Rahman, that it basically tells you that dhikr itself is correlated with Rahmah. It's correlated with Rahmah. It's correlated with mercy. All right? So that's why Habibatani ila Rahman. They're beloved to the most merciful, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are they? So if I were to basically put the punctuation, think the comma is the wrong punctuation here. It should be a colon. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim. It is subhanallah wa bihamdihi. So wait a minute, what does subhana actually mean? Subhana means, well, number one, it comes from the root sabaha. Okay, sabaha means to swim. Sabaha means to glide. And many times it can mean to swim away, to glide away. And sabaha could also mean, if you were to look at the translation, glory be to God and his praise. I don't think the translation is accurate. Because when you say subhanallah, if you were to go back to, let's say, Abdurrazzaq al-Badr, or you were to go back to the scholars of Aqidah to explain subhana, they'll always say tanzihullah subhanahu wa ta'ala an al-naqa'is. That it's basically exempting and basically making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and giving him the sanctity and the glory from any kind of naqs. What is naqs? Naqs is when something is less. So you're basically giving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sanctity. But wait a minute, so how is it related to sabaha? وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. They're basically swimming in the galaxy. Here's the word sabaha right there. Tasbih, subhana, and وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُم. And that everything is doing tasbih in the glory of the Lord Almighty, but you don't understand their method of tasbih. So the cat is sitting on the porch, and this cat is doing some tasbih as it's sitting down and just staring at me. And I didn't even know that they're doing tasbih. The lake is doing tasbih. The trees are doing tasbih. The monkeys are doing tasbih. How do we understand that? Okay. Is the sun doing tasbih? Everything is doing tasbih. How? Well, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling you is that they're following a certain order by submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, the ayah, وَالنَّجْمُ وَالشَّجَرُ يَسْجُدَانِ. وَالنَّجْمُ. What is a najm? A najm is not the star. A najm is basically the plant that grows basically on the ground. And a shajar, and some scholars said a najm is basically the star. And a shajar, they're basically the trees. Yes, Judan, they're doing sujood. How are they doing sujood? What does that even look like? Well, I'm not saying this, the tree stays somehow doing sujood. Your sujood is different than their sujood. Okay? So what does that look like? So when you say subhanallah, there's a certain glide, but the glide is in embracing the glory of the Lord Almighty. The glide is in embracing the sanctity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he is not like other things. Wait a minute, so how's that? Remember when you say sabaha, the glide, or sabaha to mean swim, there's a certain pattern. That's number one. Number two, you're basically considering a certain center. Who's the center? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the center of all things. So everything is related to the center, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the center, subhanallah, you're basically taking in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your center. You're giving him the sanctity that everything returns, everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are you doing? You're basically taking that moment to exempt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from any relationship to having any of those weaknesses that any of the creation has. So you're giving the full glory to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He is unlike anything that is created, but everything belongs and basically gets the energy or gets the life or gets the power from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the person is recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the center. So when you do tasbih, you're basically returning in the glide, in your spirit, in your heart, in your mind to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you regard Him as the center, as the place of glory, as the place that you would want to glide in your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you recognize that you don't want to distance yourself from the center, so you glide to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by basically regarding Him as all the glory goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because everything is evolving around His praise. No good happens in the world without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically channeling it to good. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. No good anybody gets, but it's coming from the rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything good is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What about evil? What about evil? Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us evil at all? Subhanallah al-Azim, the Lord Almighty, all the glory and all the magnificence goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, whether we're speaking about good or sometimes some evil, you may see it as evil, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would never attribute evil to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What about min sharri ma khalaq? Min sharri ma khalaq. Some of the things that He had created, it can come back to you as a person that is limited and see it as containing some evil. An earthquake happened, and you're wondering, why weren't these people saved? Why didn't Allah just save these people? Look, remember the tsunami? Over 200,000 people in just a couple seconds. Boom! Right there. That was in 2004. Man, Ya Allah. Remember that tsunami that happened? I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. Remember how that island in Indonesia.
I just remember watching it on the news.
Yeah, I'll never forget it. I remember just watching it on the news.
Yeah.
And right now as I'm talking to you, I'm getting the goosebumps just remembering it. I could never forget those clips, those people that some were found on a tree, or somewhere cities basically just died and killed, and cities wiped out except masajid standing up high. Nothing else left. Remember that one? Ya Allah, I could never forget that. I could never forget the tsunami. Ya Rabbi, talking about 100 meters of waves. Ya Allah, Ya Allah. All right. An Abi Hurairah radiyallahu, how much time do we have left? Just this one. This is going to be the last one, okay? عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من قال سبحان الله وبحمده في يوم 100 مرة حطت خطاياه وإن كانت مثل زبد البحر. Let's say, whoever says glory be to God and His praise 100 times in a day, his sins will be forgiven even if they are like the foam of the sea. Just subhanallah wa bihamdihi 100 times. So why 100? I mean, I already know how to say it. Is it to make me just practice better? No, because the longer you say it, remember, the longer you say something, it basically fires in your brain, and in your brain, it basically creates a path in your brain. I told you about my aunt. Had an aunt who had a stroke, and the stroke basically was a brain stroke, and it affected her ability to speak. She was not capable of talking, but she was capable of saying two things. La ilaha illallah, and whenever she would get angry, ينعن أبوك. That's it. But La ilaha illallah, that's all she was capable of saying. You could not understand anything. Her speech was completely slurred. For 9 years, she died with not being able to say but La ilaha illallah. Only La ilaha illallah. That's it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took out every single speech. But La ilaha illallah is the only thing. For 9 years, even when she died, that was the only thing she was capable of saying, because she was always saying La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. And the neurologist basically said that whatever the person was capable of doing, whether it's playing poker or whether it's saying a certain word, etc., that's what they'll be capable of, still be capable of doing even after that brain stroke that happened. If it happened on, of course, only if it happened on a certain area, because depending on the stroke and which area it affected. So yes, she was capable of saying La ilaha illallah because that's what she was continuously doing. حطت خطايا, or حطت خطايا. What is حطت? الحط means to let go, it's to release. الخطايا are basically the sins. One is خطيئة, basically means a wrongdoing. الخطايا, they're basically the wrongdoings. A خطيئة after a خطيئة after خطيئة, a sin after a sin after a sin after. Those are basically خطايا. وإن كانت مثل زبد البحر, even if it were as much and as plenty, let's say it that way, as زبد البحر, as the foam of the sea would be plenty, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would wash it away as if it didn't even exist. Ya Rabbi, make us from those that would have their sins be washed away like the way that foam is washed away on the shores of an ocean. Allahumma ameen. Ya Allah, make us from those that would engage in dhikr, in saying Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. And make us from those that would always gather for dhikr, always gather for khair, and make us from those whose name would be mentioned with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and with the malaika, and make us from those that would be mentioned as Ya ayyatuha an-nafsul mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت. We'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. Any questions before we sign off?
I had one, but did you stop recording or?
Oh, you want me to stop recording? Sure. We could do that for those that don't mind recording. So if they would want to unmute themselves, that's okay too.